puppies were hugging for the last time before being put down, when suddenly the vet screamed, "Stop now!" In that one instant, everything changed. A quiet worker thought she was just saving two helpless lives, but hidden inside those tiny pups was a secret worth more than anyone imagined. What looked like a routine moment of mercy explodes into a battle against power, corruption, and betrayal. As danger closes in, the question isn't just whether the puppies will survive, it's whether the people who tried to kill them can be stopped before more lives are erased. What secret were these puppies never supposed to reveal, and how far will someone go to silence the truth? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the stark euthanasia room, casting harsh shadows across the metal examination table. Two small puppies, their tan and white fur matted with shelter grime, huddled together on the cold steel surface. Their little bodies trembled as they pressed closer, seeking comfort in each other's warmth. Dr. Bram Kincaid stood beside the table, syringe in hand. Though he'd performed this sad duty hundreds of times before, something felt different today. The larger pup lifted its head and met his gaze with soulful brown eyes. As the puppy shifted, the overhead light caught something unusual on its ear. Bram leaned in closer, squinting. There, partially hidden in the fold of the pup's ear, was a tiny crescent of blue ink. "Stop now!" Bram's voice boomed through the small room, making everyone jump. The syringe clattered to the floor as he dropped it, his hands shaking. Mercy Calder, who had been quietly assisting as she always did during these difficult procedures, rushed forward. Without hesitation, she wrapped her arms protectively around the puppies. They immediately burrowed into her shelter scrubs, their tiny tails wagging with relief. "What's the meaning of this?" Vince Mallory's sharp voice cut through the tension as he burst through the door. The shelter director's face was flushed red with anger, his thin lips pressed into a tight line. "We have quotas to meet, Doctor." These dogs were already marked for euthanasia. Bram stood his ground, drawing himself up to his full height. "There's something not right here, Vince. These pups have markings, deliberate markings, that I've never seen before." Mercy gently tilted the puppy's ear, revealing the blue crescent to everyone in the room. "He's right," she said softly but with conviction. "I've never seen anything like this either, and I check every animal that comes through intake." The air in the room grew thick with tension. Vince's face darkened as he stormed over to the table, roughly pushing past Bram to examine the puppies himself. His fingers dug into the puppy's scruff, making it yelp. "Be careful," Mercy protested, tightening her protective hold. "It's probably just some kid's marker drawing," Vince snapped, but Bram noticed the way the director's hands had started to shake. "This doesn't change anything. These dogs are scheduled for euthanasia, and that's final." Bram crossed his arms, planting himself firmly between Vince and the examination table. "No, not until we figure out what these markings mean. This could be important." "Important?" Vince scoffed, but there was an edge of nervousness in his voice. "They're street mutts, nothing more. Now step aside and let's get this done." "I said no." Bram's voice was quiet but firm. He turned to Mercy, who was still cradling the puppies. "Get them back to their kennel. I'm putting a hold on any euthanasia for these two until we can investigate further." Mercy didn't need to be told twice. She gathered both puppies in her arms, their little faces peeking over her elbows as she hurried from the room. The smaller one gave a tiny lick to her chin, as if saying thank you. Vince's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. "You're overstepping your authority, Kincaid. I run this shelter, not you. You're just a contract vet who comes in twice a week. And as the veterinarian of record, I have both the right and the responsibility to halt any procedure I deem questionable," Bram replied evenly. "Something isn't adding up here, Vince. Those markings were deliberate and professional, not some kid's doodle. We need to find out what they mean." The director jabbed a finger into Bram's chest. "You're making a big mistake. These are just two worthless mutts taking up space we don't have. They'll be put down tomorrow, with or without your approval." But Bram saw something in Vince's eyes that confirmed his suspicions. Fear. The shelter director was scared of something, and it had to do with those mysterious blue markings. In the kennels, Mercy carefully placed the puppies back in their run. They immediately began to play, seeming to understand they'd been given a second chance. She watched them through the chain-link door, her mind racing with questions. In her 15 years working at the shelter, she'd never seen Bram lose his cool like that. He was always the picture of professional calm, even during the hardest days. But he'd seen something in those markings that alarmed him deeply. The bigger puppy brought a toy over to the kennel door, tail wagging hopefully. Mercy slipped her fingers through the chain link, letting the pup lick them. "Don't worry," she whispered. "We won't let anything happen to you. We're going to figure this out." Back in the euthanasia room, Bram was carefully examining the dropped syringe for damage, while Vince continued to fume by the door. The tension between them was palpable, like a stretched rubber band ready to snap. "This isn't over, Kincaid," Vince growled. "Not by a long shot." Bram met his gaze steadily. "No," he agreed quietly. "I don't think it is," as Vince stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Bram let out a long breath. In 20 years of veterinary work, he'd seen a lot of concerning things, but something about those blue crescents set off every alarm bell in his head. He needed to find out what they meant, and fast. Through the window, he could see Mercy in the kennel area, clearly deep in thought as she watched the puppies play. She'd always been quiet, easy to overlook, but Bram had noticed her fierce dedication to the animals in her care. He had a feeling he'd need her help to unravel whatever mystery those blue markings represented. The fluorescent lights continued their relentless buzzing overhead, but now they seemed to highlight the growing shadows in the corners of the room. Something was very wrong at the county shelter, and those two innocent puppies had just helped expose the first thread of a much darker secret. The corridor echoed with Vince Mallory's angry footsteps as he stormed away. Mercy's heart was still racing from the confrontation in the euthanasia room. She looked down at the two puppies playing in their kennel, their tails wagging without a care in the world. But she knew better. They weren't safe yet. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the kennel door. "Come on, sweeties," she whispered, gathering both pups in her arms. The smaller one nuzzled into her neck while its brother tried to lick her face. "We need to find you somewhere safe." Years of working at the shelter had taught Mercy every corner and hiding spot. She hurried down the back hallway toward the laundry room, checking over her shoulder with each step. The industrial washers hummed steadily, providing cover for any puppy sounds. Two large hampers sat empty in the corner, fresh linens stacked nearby. Mercy quickly lined the hampers with clean blankets, creating soft nests. "Just for a little while," she murmured, settling each pup into its own temporary sanctuary. She covered them gently with more blankets, making sure they could still breathe easily. "Stay quiet for me, okay?" The puppies seemed to understand, curling up in their soft hideaways. Mercy's heart ached at their trust in her. She had to find out what was really going on. She found Dr. Kincaid in his small office, reviewing records with intense concentration. He looked up as she entered, closing the door firmly behind her. "Those markings weren't random, were they?" Mercy asked without preamble. Her voice was quiet but firm. "I need to know what's happening. Those puppies' lives depend on it." Bram ran a hand through his graying hair, his blue eyes troubled. "No, they weren't random. I've seen similar markings before, years ago, at another clinic. They were used to identify dogs being moved through less than legal channels." "You mean trafficking?" Mercy's stomach clenched. "Possibly." He turned his computer screen so she could see it. "I've been going through the intake records. These pups supposedly came in as strays last week, but look at these discrepancies." Mercy leaned in, scanning the database entries. After 15 years of processing paperwork, she knew exactly what to look for. The intake times don't match the kennel cards, and there's no record of the required stray hold period. "Exactly." Bram's voice was grim. "Someone's manipulating the system, pushing these dogs through for immediate euthanasia to cover something up. The question is, how many others have there been?" Before Mercy could respond, the office door burst open. Vince Mallory filled the doorframe, his face flushed with anger. "Where are they?" he demanded, glaring at Mercy. "Those dogs were scheduled for euthanasia. This is direct insubordination." Mercy straightened her spine. though her heart was pounding. The dogs are safe, and they're staying that way until we get some real answers about those markings. You little. Mallory advanced into the room, jabbing a finger toward her face. You're nothing but a kennel cleaner. You have no authority here. Get out of this building right now, or I'll have security remove you and file charges for theft. The only theft happening here is whatever you're trying to cover up. Mercy shot back, surprising herself with her own boldness. Years of staying quiet, of keeping her head down, fell away in the face of protecting those innocent puppies. That's enough. Mallory's voice rose to a shout. Security! I want this woman escorted out immediately. Bram stood, moving to stand beside Mercy. If she goes, I go, and I'll be making some very interesting phone calls about those database irregularities. Mallory's face went from red to white. You're both making a huge mistake. This is your last warning. Get those dogs back here now, or there will be consequences. The only mistake, Mercy said quietly, was thinking nobody would notice or care what you're doing here. Get out, Mallory roared. You're fired. And don't think about coming back. Mercy's hands were shaking as she gathered her few personal items from her locker, but her resolve never wavered. She could hear Mallory's voice echoing through the building, ordering staff to search for the missing puppies. Bram caught up with her in the parking lot. Are they safe? He asked in a low voice. Mercy nodded. For now, but we need to figure out what's really going on here, and fast. I'll start making calls, Bram assured her. We'll find out what those markings mean. Just be careful, Mercy. People who traffic animals aren't known for playing nice. Looking back at the shelter building where she'd worked for so many years, Mercy felt a complex mix of emotions: fear, anger, determination. She'd never been one to make waves or stand out. But seeing those blue crescents, knowing something terrible was happening to innocent animals, she couldn't stay quiet anymore. I'll be careful, she promised. But I'm not backing down. Those puppies need us. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot as Mercy walked to her car. She knew she'd have to come back after dark, when the building was empty, to rescue the puppies from their laundry room hideaway. It would be risky, but she had no choice. Whatever Mallory was involved in, she couldn't let those pups become just two more victims of his secrets. Her hands still trembled slightly as she gripped her steering wheel, but her jaw was set with determination. For the first time in her life, Mercy Calder was taking a stand, and there would be no turning back. Mercy sat alone in her small apartment, staring at her phone as another message from a former co-worker popped up. How could you steal those dogs? We trusted you. Her heart sank as she scrolled through similar messages, each one a fresh wound. The local news website displayed grainy security footage of her hurriedly moving through the shelter's laundry room, the hampers containing the hidden puppies clearly visible. Mallory had wasted no time spreading his version of events. The headline screamed, "Long-time shelter employee, caught stealing animals on camera." She pulled her knees to her chest, fighting back tears. 15 years of dedicated service. And now everyone believed she was nothing but a thief. The puppies were safe, hidden at a friend's house, but her reputation was in tatters. Her phone buzzed again, another former friend unfriending her on social media. The sun had long since set when a gentle knock at her door made her jump. Peering through the peephole, she was surprised to see Dr. Bram Kincaid standing in the dimly lit hallway, looking troubled. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly when she opened the door. "I've been doing some digging, and, well, we need to talk." Mercy glanced down the empty hallway before letting him inside. He carried a small black case, his normally pristine appearance slightly disheveled, as if he'd been working late into the night. "I saw the news," he said, setting the case on her coffee table. "Mallory's playing dirty, trying to discredit you, before we can expose whatever he's involved in." "It's working," Mercy replied, gesturing to her phone. "Everyone thinks I'm some kind of criminal now." Bram ran a hand through his graying hair. "I almost didn't come. The hospital board is pressuring me to distance myself from this whole situation, my position at the clinic." He trailed off, then squared his shoulders. "But this is bigger than my career. Those markings have been bothering me. and I brought something that might help us understand what we're dealing with." He opened the case, revealing a handheld scanner. "It's a universal microchip reader. I borrowed it from the clinic. If we can scan those pups, maybe we can find out where they really came from." Mercy felt a spark of hope for the first time since her suspension. "They're at my friend Sarah's house. She's keeping them safe in her garage apartment. We could go now, while it's dark." 20 minutes later, they pulled up to a modest house on the outskirts of town. Sarah, a fellow animal lover who had never questioned Mercy's integrity, led them up to the garage apartment where the two puppies were curled up together on a plush dog bed. "They're beautiful pups," Bram commented, kneeling beside them. The puppies, golden retriever mixes with unusually rich copper coats, wagged their tails at his approach. Purebred, or very close to it. Definitely not ordinary strays. He ran the scanner over the first puppy's shoulders, where microchips were typically implanted. The device beeped, and Bram's eyebrows shot up as he read the display. "This can't be right," he muttered, scanning the second puppy. Another beep. "These chips, they're registered to a champion retriever named Aurora's Golden Promise. She disappeared from her owner's property 3 months ago." Mercy leaned in to look at the screen. "A show dog?" "More than that. Aurora was worth over $50,000. She belonged to Catherine Maxwell, one of the biggest names in competitive dog breeding. The theft made headlines in the dog show world." Bram's blue eyes met Mercy's. "These puppies, they must be Aurora's last litter. The timing fits. So someone stole a valuable show dog, waited until she had puppies, and then—" Mercy couldn't finish the thought, her throat tight with anger and grief. "And then they needed to dispose of the evidence," Bram completed grimly. "That's why Mallory was so desperate to euthanize these pups. They're proof of organized theft and breeding. This isn't just shelter mismanagement, it's criminal enterprise." Sarah, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "But why would anyone steal puppies just to euthanize them? Wouldn't they be valuable too?" "Unless they're trying to control the bloodline," Bram explained. "In high-end breeding, exclusivity matters. If Aurora's puppies flooded the market, it would decrease their value. Plus, they're evidence of the original theft." Mercy stroked one of the puppies, its soft fur running through her fingers. "We have to contact Catherine Maxwell. She needs to know her dog's puppies are alive." "It's not that simple," Bram cautioned. "If Mallory is involved in dog theft rings, he has connections we don't know about. These people steal dogs worth thousands of dollars. They're not small-time criminals. By exposing this, we'd be putting ourselves at risk." "We're already at risk," Mercy pointed out. "I've lost my job, my reputation. You're risking your career just by being here. We can't back down now." The puppies had fallen asleep again, peaceful and innocent, unaware of the dangerous truth of their existence. Bram watched them for a long moment, his professional demeanor cracking to reveal genuine concern. "You're right," he finally said. "But we need to be smart about this. We document everything, the chip numbers, the markings, the shelter records. Build a case that can't be ignored or covered up. Then we take it to people who can help." "Who?" Mercy asked. "I have contacts in the State Veterinary Board, and Catherine Maxwell has connections with animal welfare organizations. But first—" He pulled out his phone and started taking pictures of the sleeping puppies, carefully documenting the blue crescents in their ears. "We gather proof, and we keep these little ones safe until we can expose the truth." Mercy felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. These puppies weren't just innocent animals anymore. They were evidence of a criminal operation that had been operating right under their noses. How many other dogs had disappeared into this network? How many other shelters were involved? Looking at Bram's determined face as he documented every detail, Mercy realized they had crossed a line. There would be no going back to their quiet, orderly lives. But seeing those puppies sleeping peacefully, knowing they had saved them from being silenced forever, she knew they had made the right choice. Sarah brought them coffee, and they spent the next hour carefully recording every detail they could find. The puppies' markings, their distinctive features that matched their mother's breed standard, the damning evidence of their microchips. With each piece of documentation, the picture became clearer and more dangerous. What had started as a simple act of compassion had unveiled something far darker than they could have imagined. But now that they knew the truth, there was only one path forward, no matter the cost. Bram's fingers flew across his phone's keyboard, his face illuminated by the screen's blue glow. "Wait a minute," he said suddenly, his voice tight with recognition. "I made a mistake earlier. These puppies don't belong to Catherine Maxwell. They're registered to Eulalie Kingsford." Mercy looked up from where she sat, cross-legged on the floor with the puppies. "Who's that?" "Only one of the most influential people in the state." Bram ran a hand through his greying hair. "The Kingsfords own half the timberland north of here. Eulalie inherited the business when her husband died young, and she's doubled its value since then. She's also known for breeding champion retrievers. Her bloodlines are worth a fortune." "And someone stole from her?" Mercy's eyes widened. "That seems risky." "Very." Bram showed her his phone screen, displaying a news article with a photo of an elegant older woman with silver hair standing beside a magnificent golden retriever. "This is Aurora's Golden Promise, or just Aurora, one of Eulalie's prize breeding dogs. The theft happened 3 months ago, but the police investigation went nowhere." Sarah, who had been quiet, spoke up from her perch on the kitchen counter. "Mrs. Kingsford comes into the coffee shop sometimes. She's intense, the kind of person who expects things done exactly her way. And now we know where her dog's puppies ended up," Mercy said softly, looking down at the sleeping pups. "The shelter system, where they'd disappear without a trace." Bram began pacing, his professional demeanor cracking as the pieces fell into place. "Think about it. How many purebred dogs come through the shelter system? How many get labeled unadoptable and euthanized before anyone can ask questions?" Mercy felt sick as memories surfaced. Beautiful dogs with supposed behavioral issues, paperwork that never quite added up, Mallory's insistence on quick euthanasia for certain animals. "The intake numbers," she said, "they never matched our actual capacity. I always thought it was just bad record-keeping, but it was deliberate," Bram finished. "A way to hide dogs moving through the system. The falsified paperwork, the rushed euthanasia orders, it's all part of a bigger operation." Mercy stood up, anger replacing her usual quiet demeanor. "They're using the shelter as a processing center for stolen dogs. Kill the evidence. Keep the valuable breeding stock. And no one looks too closely because it's just another sad day at the county shelter." The weight of the revelation settled over the room. What they'd uncovered wasn't just shelter mismanagement or individual cruelty. It was an organized criminal enterprise using the system's built-in opacity to hide their operations. "We need to tell Mrs. Kingsford," Mercy said firmly. "She has the influence to make people listen." Bram nodded slowly. "She's not someone who tolerates being stolen from. Her support could protect us, but we need absolute proof first. The microchip records, photos of the markings, documentation of the shelter's irregular procedures. I have access to years of intake records," Mercy said. "I can show the pattern. How many purebred dogs came in, how quickly they were euthanized, the paperwork discrepancies. I noticed things weren't right, but I never put it all together until now." She moved to her laptop, pulling up spreadsheets and files she'd kept out of habit, her private record of the shelter's activities. Numbers that hadn't made sense suddenly revealed their dark purpose. "Look at this," she pointed to a column. "Last month, 23 purebred dogs were logged as strays, all euthanized within 48 hours for aggressive behavior or untreatable conditions. But I worked with those dogs. They were healthy, well-trained. Show dogs, probably." Bram leaned over her shoulder, his presence steady and reassuring. "They're using shelter quotas to hide their operation. Every shelter has to euthanize some animals. It's a sad reality of the system. They're exploiting that expectation." "And I helped them," Mercy whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't know, but I was part of it. All those dogs." "Hey." Bram's hand found her shoulder. "You're the one who stopped it. Those puppies would be dead if you hadn't acted." Sarah brought fresh coffee, the warm mugs a comfort in the increasingly chilly night. "So, what's the next step?" "We document everything," Bram said firmly. "Every inconsistency, every suspicious euthanasia, every piece of falsified paperwork. Build a case so strong it can't be ignored or covered up. Then we take it to Eulalie Kingsford. Mercy looked at the sleeping puppies, their presence both a miracle and a burden. They were living proof of the corruption, but keeping them alive put everyone at risk. Her career in animal care was probably over. Mallory had seen to that. But maybe that didn't matter anymore. Perhaps this was what she'd been preparing for all along, keeping those careful records, noting every irregularity, trusting her instincts that something was wrong. "I'll need a few days," she said, determination replacing her earlier uncertainty. "To organize the evidence, match dates with the theft reports, create a timeline that shows the pattern." "I can help," Bram offered. "I have records from my clinic. Vaccination histories, health certificates. If these dogs were being stolen and moved through the system, there might be connections." Sarah raised her coffee mug. "Count me in too. The coffee shop sees everything. People talk, especially about their missing pets. I can start asking around carefully." Mercy felt a surge of gratitude for these unlikely allies. 24 hours ago, she'd been alone with her suspicions. Now she had partners in uncovering the truth. "We'll need to keep the puppies safe," she said, "once Mallory realizes they're still alive." "I have a friend with a farm outside town," Sarah offered. "Very private, excellent security system. The puppies would be safe there until we can expose this." Bram nodded approval. "Good. We move them tomorrow, then start building our case. But everyone needs to understand, this is dangerous. We're dealing with organized crime, people who've been stealing and killing dogs for profit. They won't hesitate to protect their operation." "I understand," Mercy said quietly, "but I can't walk away. Not now that I know the truth." She looked at her laptop screen, at the damning numbers that revealed too much suffering. No more hiding behind quotas and paperwork. No more letting them use the shelter system for their crimes. The puppies stirred in their sleep, tiny paws twitching as they dreamed. Mercy watched them, thinking of their mother, stolen from her home, used for breeding, and then probably disposed of just like they'd planned for her puppies. How many other dogs had met similar fates? How many grieving owners never knew what really happened to their beloved pets? The truth would cost her, had already cost her job and reputation. But seeing those sleeping puppies, knowing they represented countless others who hadn't been saved, Mercy knew she would pay whatever price was necessary to expose this corruption and bring justice to all the animals lost to this cruel system. Mercy sat in her small apartment, surrounded by scattered papers and empty coffee cups, when a soft knock at the door made her jump. Bram stood there, looking tired but determined, with a familiar face beside him. Jake Martinez, one of the shelter's most reliable transport drivers. "Jake?" Mercy's surprise showed in her voice. "What are you doing here?" Jake stepped inside, his weathered face creased with concern. "Those pups you saved. I've been watching Mallory destroy evidence all week. Something's real wrong there, and I want to help make it right." Relief flooded through Mercy. Jake had been driving shelter vehicles for 15 years, knew every staff member, every procedure. His support could be invaluable. "We've got someone else too," Bram added, guiding another person forward. Lisa Chen from Records, clutching a thick manila envelope to her chest. "I've been keeping copies," Lisa whispered, her hands trembling slightly as she laid out document after document. "Every time something didn't add up, every time Mallory made me change the intake forms, I knew it was wrong, but I was scared to speak up." Mercy hugged her impulsively. "Thank you. Both of you. This means everything." They spent the next hour reviewing Lisa's documents, matching them against Mercy's own records. The pattern emerged clearly. Purebred dogs marked as strays, behavior assessments altered, euthanasia orders rushed through without proper waiting periods. "We need more," Bram said finally. "These copies help, but we need the original database records, the actual kennel logs. Those would prove tampering." Jake leaned forward. "I know when Mallory's out of the building, board meeting every Thursday morning, and I've got keys to every door." "That's too risky," Mercy protested. "If you're caught." "Which is why we need a better cover," Lisa interrupted. "The HVAC system's been acting up. I could schedule an inspection, create a work order that would get you in legitimately." The plan took shape quickly. Lisa would generate the paperwork. Jake would ensure the right doors were unlocked. Bram would file for an emergency hold order on the puppies through his veterinary authority, buying them precious time. But they needed one more ally, someone with real power. "We need to contact Eulalie Kingsford," Mercy said firmly. "These are her dogs, her bloodlines. She has the resources to fight this legally." Bram nodded slowly. "I can arrange it. She's a client, difficult but honest, if we show her concrete evidence." The meeting with Eulalie Kingsford took place in her sprawling estate the next morning. The silver-haired woman sat rigid in her leather armchair, listening as they laid out their suspicions. "Those puppies carry my kennel's marking," she said finally, her voice sharp with controlled anger. "Show me proof of this conspiracy, and I'll bring every legal resource I have to bear." "We're getting that proof tomorrow," Mercy promised, "but we need your help to protect everyone involved." Eulalie's eyes narrowed. "You have it. No one steals from me with impunity." The next morning found Mercy in borrowed coveralls, tool belt at her waist, following Jake through the blonde.org shelter's back entrance. Her heart pounded as she signed in as Amy Wheeler, HVAC specialist. "Remember," Jake murmured, "Lisa's disabled the cameras in the office for maintenance. You've got 20 minutes max." Mercy nodded, forcing her hands to stay steady as she approached Mallory's office. The key Jake had provided worked smoothly. Inside, she booted up the computer with the password Lisa had obtained. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, downloading files, audit logs, everything that could prove systematic fraud. Each passing minute felt like an hour. "Someone's coming," Jake's urgent whisper crackled through her earpiece. "Finish up!" Mercy yanked the flash drive free, heart in her throat. She barely had time to close everything down before footsteps approached. Grabbing her toolbox, she dropped to her knees and pretended to examine the office's heating vent. The door opened. "Everything okay in here?" Mercy kept her face turned away, disguising her voice. "Just finishing up, ma'am. System checks out fine." She gathered her tools with deliberate slowness, painfully aware of the flash drive burning in her pocket. The staff member watched for a moment, then continued down the hall. Outside, Mercy's legs shook so badly she had to lean against Jake's van. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." Back at her apartment, they gathered around her laptop as she opened the files. Page after page of damning evidence appeared, deleted records restored, changed dates exposed, falsified behavior assessments revealed. "This proves everything," Lisa breathed, scanning the audit logs. "Every changed record, every rushed euthanasia, every fake intake form, it's all here." Bram's phone buzzed. "The hold order came through," he announced. "Those puppies are legally protected now. Mallory can't touch them." Mercy sat back, overwhelmed by what they'd accomplished. The evidence was secure. The puppies were safe. They had powerful allies and irrefutable proof. Her phone lit up with a text from Eulalie Kingsford. "My lawyers are ready. Let's shut them down." For the first time since this began, Mercy felt real hope. They weren't just fighting back. They were going to win. Justice would finally come for all the dogs lost to this cruel scheme, and the shelter system would be cleaned up at last. Lisa squeezed her hand. "You did it, Mercy. You really did it." "We did it," Mercy corrected, looking at each of her allies, the quiet records clerk who'd risked her job, the loyal driver who'd provided access, the powerful woman lending her influence, and Bram, who'd stood beside her from the start. We all did it together. The evidence was secured, the puppies protected, and their team was ready for the next phase. Now they could move forward with exposing the truth, knowing they had everything they needed to bring down this corrupt operation once and for all. The fluorescent lights of the shelter hallway cast harsh shadows as Mercy organized supplies in the medication room. Her hands moved automatically through the familiar routine, while her mind raced with plans. The evidence they'd gathered felt like a ticking time bomb, one that could blow this whole operation wide open. A commotion in the corridor made her freeze. Heavy footsteps approached, accompanied by the sharp tap of expensive shoes on linoleum. Mercy's stomach dropped as Vince Mallory rounded the corner, his face flushed with rage. Behind him strode Harold Blix, the county procurement chief, his usual oily smile replaced by a grim expression. "There she is," Mallory spat. "Search her locker, now." Deputy Lyle Morrow appeared, his uniform crisp and his expression carefully blank. "Ma'am, step aside, please. What's going on?" Mercy's voice shook slightly, though she fought to keep her composure. Blix held up a ring of keys. "Anonymous tip about controlled substances being stolen. Very serious matter." His words dripped with false concern. Mercy watched in horror as they marched to her locker. Her heart pounded as Deputy Morrow opened it, revealing 2 small bottles that she'd never seen before. "Well, well," Mallory said, his voice thick with satisfaction. "Ketamine and phenobarbital. Both Schedule 3 controlled substances. Care to explain that, Miss Calder?" "Those aren't mine," Mercy protested. "Someone planted those." "A likely story." Blix shook his head sadly. "I'm afraid we'll need to contact the DEA about this. Such a shame." Deputy Morrow pulled out his handcuffs. "Miss Calder, I'm going to need you to—" "Wait!" Dr. Bram Kincaid's authoritative voice cut through the tension. He strode down the hallway, his white coat billowing. "Those drugs are under my supervision. Any investigation needs to go through proper channels first." Mallory's face reddened further. "This doesn't concern you, Doctor. We have a serious criminal matter here." "Actually," Bram said coolly, "as the veterinarian of record, all controlled substances fall under my purview. You'll need a formal investigation and proper warrants before making any arrests." While they argued, Mercy noticed movement at the end of the hall, Lisa, their allied clerk, making frantic gestures toward the back of the building. Something else was wrong. "The puppies," she mouthed silently. Mercy's blood ran cold. Of course, they'd used this distraction to seize the evidence. She had to act fast. "Furthermore," Bram continued, positioning himself between Mercy and the others, "any seizure of controlled substances requires specific documentation that I don't see present." As the men argued jurisdiction and procedure, Mercy began inching backward. Deputy Morrow noticed first, reaching for his belt. "Ma'am, don't move." But Mercy was already running. She burst through the door to the kennel area, her footsteps echoing off concrete walls. Behind her, she heard shouting and the thunder of pursuing feet. The puppies were in the isolation ward, just 30 feet away. She could hear Mallory bellowing orders, Bram's voice rising in response, arguing about protocols and proper procedures. She reached the kennel just as she heard Blix shout, "They're classified as biohazards now. Seize them immediately." Mercy's hands trembled as she worked the kennel latch. The puppies looked up at her with trusting eyes, tails wagging. She scooped them up, one under each arm, their warm bodies squirming against her. "Stop right there!" Deputy Morrow's command echoed through the kennels. But Mercy was already moving toward the loading bay, where deliveries came in. She knew every inch of this shelter, every shortcut and service door. The puppies sensed her urgency, staying quiet as she ran. Behind her, she could hear Bram's voice rising again. "Deputy, I must inform you that without proper documentation, any seizure of these animals constitutes a violation of State Health Code 1573, subsection C." She burst through the loading bay doors into the weak morning sunlight. Her car was parked just around the corner, and she had the keys in her pocket. The puppy's warm weight against her chest gave her strength as she ran. Just as she reached her car, she heard the loading bay door slam open again. But strong hands were suddenly helping her. Jake, their transport driver ally, materialized from nowhere to open her car door. "Go," he urged. "I'll delay them." Mercy placed the puppies in the back seat and jumped behind the wheel. As she started the engine, she caught a glimpse in her rear-view mirror. Bram, standing in the loading bay doorway, his tall frame blocking Deputy Morrow's path, calmly citing regulation after regulation while Jake's truck accidentally blocked the exit. Her tires squealed as she pulled away. The puppies huddled together in the back seat, whimpering softly. "It's okay, babies," she soothed, her heart still racing. "We're going somewhere safe." She drove carefully, fighting the urge to speed, taking a winding route through back streets. Her phone buzzed, a text from Bram. "All clear. Meet at the safe house. Deputy backed down when I mentioned involving the State Veterinary Board. Mercy let out a shaky breath. They'd escaped this round, but Mallory's retaliation showed how desperate and dangerous he was becoming. The planted drugs, the biohazard classification, the attempted seizure, all of it proved how far he'd go to protect his trafficking operation. The puppies had settled down, curled together in a peaceful heap. Looking at them in the rearview mirror, Mercy felt a fierce surge of determination. No matter what Mallory threw at them next, she wouldn't let him win. They had the evidence now, and allies who would stand with them. This wasn't just about two puppies anymore. It was about exposing years of corruption and cruelty. She turned onto the road leading to their safe house, a small veterinary clinic owned by one of Bram's colleagues. They'd known Mallory would strike back. Now they knew just how far he'd go. But they were ready. The next move would be theirs. The safe house was quiet except for the gentle whir of Bram's laptop and the soft snoring of the puppies, curled up in a makeshift bed of blankets. Mercy sat cross-legged on the floor beside Bram, her eyes burning from staring at endless spreadsheets of kennel data. "Look at this," Bram said, his voice tight with concentration. He pointed to a column of dates on the screen. "These euthanasia orders. They're not random. They cluster around specific dates." Mercy leaned closer, her shoulder brushing against his. The numbers began to swim before her eyes, but she forced herself to focus. "Every 6 weeks," she murmured, "like clockwork, and always involving high-value breeds." Bram's finger traced down the screen. "Golden Retrievers, German Shepherds, Labrador Retrievers. Show me those dates again." Mercy grabbed a notepad, scribbling quickly. The first cluster was right after those champion retriever puppies went missing from the Kingsford estate. Bram pulled up another file, the shelter's intake records. Cross, referencing with intake dates. "Look here. Every time there's a reported theft of purebred dogs in the county, we see matching euthanasia orders within 48 hours. They're covering their tracks," Mercy breathed. "Stealing the dogs, then filing false euthanasia reports to explain why the dogs can't be found." The puppies stirred in their sleep, one little paw twitching. Mercy reached over to stroke their soft fur, remembering how close they'd come to being real victims of those falsified orders. "Wait." Bram sat up straighter, his eyes intent on the screen. "There's something else. These property records." He pulled up a new window, showing satellite maps of the old Kingsford timber holdings. "Mrs. Kingsford mentioned some of her land was in foreclosure, right? Look at this parcel." He zoomed in on an abandoned barn complex. The utilities are still active, small but consistent power usage, even though it's supposed to be empty. Mercy's heart began to race. The mother, she has to be there. They wouldn't kill her. Not a champion show dog worth thousands. They're probably breeding her. That's why Mallory was so desperate to destroy the evidence, Bram said grimly. Those puppies aren't just stolen property. They're proof of an ongoing breeding operation. Mercy stood up and began pacing, energy coursing through her. Think about it. When you shouted stop that day, you didn't just save 2 puppies. You exposed their whole system. She paused, turning to face him. The blue crescent wasn't just a breeder's mark. It was their brand, their way of tracking their illegal inventory. Bram nodded slowly. And every euthanasia order covers another theft. They're not just stealing pets. They're running a sophisticated breeding operation using stolen bloodlines. "Mrs. Kingsford needs to see this." Mercy pulled out her phone, then hesitated. "But we need proof. Real proof, not just data." "We need to check that barn," Bram agreed. He stood up, stretching his tall frame. "But we have to be careful. If we're right about this, then we're dealing with organized crime," Mercy finished. "Not just shelter corruption." They looked at each other for a long moment, understanding the weight of what they'd discovered. The puppies slept on, innocent of the storm gathering around them. "I'll call Mrs. Kingsford," Mercy said finally. "She needs to know what's happening on her land, and we'll need her permission to investigate." While Mercy made the call, Bram continued analyzing the data, mapping out patterns of theft and falsified records. The scope of the operation was staggering, dozens of dogs over several years, all vanishing behind a wall of paperwork. Mrs. Kingsford answered on the second ring. Her voice was sharp with interest as Mercy explained their discoveries. "That barn complex was supposed to be abandoned months ago," she said. "I'll have my security team meet you there. Don't go in alone. These people are dangerous." After ending the call, Mercy sat back down beside Bram. "We go at dawn," she said. "Mrs. Kingsford's people will back us up." Bram nodded, still studying the screen. "All this time," he murmured. "All these animals, vanishing into their system. And it took these two little ones to break it open." He gestured at the sleeping puppies. "Because you saw the mark," Mercy said softly. "Because you didn't look away." "Because we both refused to let it go," he corrected, meeting her eyes. The weight of their discovery settled around them like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about saving two puppies anymore. It was about exposing years of organized theft and fraud, about bringing down a criminal enterprise that had operated in plain sight. They spent the next hours preparing, gathering evidence, making backup copies of their data, planning their approach to the barn complex. The puppies woke occasionally for water or comfort, always settling back to sleep with complete trust in their protectors. As the night deepened, Mercy found herself returning to that moment in the shelter, Bram's shout of "Stop now!" echoing off sterile walls. It hadn't been luck or coincidence. It had been the first crack in a careful facade, the beginning of its collapse. Dawn wasn't far off. Soon they would have their final proof, the missing dam, hidden away on Kingsford's own land. But for now, in the quiet of their safe house, Mercy watched over their sleeping charges and felt the certainty of justice approaching. The truth, like those tiny blue crescents hidden in puppy ears, had been there all along. They just had to be brave enough to see it, and strong enough to act on what they found. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Mrs. Kingsford's study, casting warm light across stacks of documents and legal papers. Mercy sat in a plush leather chair, still amazed at how quickly their situation had changed. Just 24 hours ago, they'd been scrambling for safety. Now, surrounded by the timber heiress's wealth and influence, they finally had real resources to fight back. "I've engaged Blackwood Securities," Mrs. Kingsford announced, setting down her porcelain teacup with a decisive click. "Top-tier private investigators, very discreet. They're already conducting background checks on everyone involved." Bram nodded from his position by the window. "That's excellent. We need to know exactly who we're dealing with. And Judge Harrison has agreed to hear our petition this afternoon," Mrs. Kingsford continued, her silver hair catching the sunlight. She's always been a strong advocate for animal welfare. More importantly, she despises corruption. Mercy clutched her own teacup, barely tasting the expensive blend. Will the search order be enough? Mallory's had time to hide evidence. "That's why timing is critical," Bram said, turning to face them. His blue eyes were steady with determination. "We need to coordinate the search with multiple locations simultaneously. The shelter, Mallory's office, and that barn complex." "Mrs." Kingsford smiled thinly. "Leave the logistics to Blackwood. They're very good at what they do." Throughout the morning, their plans took shape. Private investigators arrived in waves, each specializing in different aspects of the operation. They moved with quiet efficiency, setting up a command center in Mrs. Kingsford's conservatory. Mercy watched in amazement as professionals processed the evidence she and Bram had gathered. Their scattered pieces of data transformed into comprehensive briefings and actionable intelligence. One investigator specialized in financial forensics, tracking suspicious patterns in the shelter's accounts. Another focused on building detailed profiles of everyone involved in the trafficking ring. "Look at this," Bram said softly, guiding Mercy to a display screen. "They've mapped every suspicious euthanasia order against known thefts. The pattern is undeniable." Mercy leaned closer, her shoulder brushing against his. The contact sent a small thrill through her, even as she focused on the data. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "All this time we were stumbling around in the dark, and now we have light," he finished, smiling down at her. By early afternoon, they relocated to the courthouse. Judge Harrison's chambers were austere but welcoming, with warm wood paneling and shelves of legal texts. The judge herself was a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, who listened intently as their attorney presented the evidence. "This is disturbing," Judge Harrison said, reviewing the documents. "Very disturbing indeed. And you say there's an immediate risk to the animals?" "Yes, Your Honor," Mercy spoke up, her voice stronger than she expected. "Every day we wait puts more animals at risk and gives them more time to destroy evidence." The judge studied her for a long moment. "You've taken quite a risk coming forward, Miss Calder." "Someone had to, Your Honor." Judge Harrison nodded slowly, then reached for her stamp. "I'm granting the search order, limited to the specified locations and records. You'll have 48 hours. As they left the courthouse, Mercy felt lighter than she had in weeks. "I can't believe it's really happening," she said. Bram squeezed her shoulder gently. "Believe it. You made this happen, Mercy. Your courage started all of this." She looked up at him, seeing the warmth in his eyes. "I couldn't have done it alone. You believed in me when no one else did." They shared a moment of connection, something deeper than just professional allies. But before either could speak, Mrs. Kingsford's car pulled up. "The investigators want to brief us on tomorrow's operation," she said crisply. "We need to be thoroughly prepared." Back at the estate, they spent hours reviewing procedures and contingencies. The private investigators were thorough, mapping out every possible scenario. Mercy felt her confidence growing as she realized how much support they now had. "We'll hit all 3 locations at exactly 9 o'clock tomorrow morning," the lead investigator explained. "Maximum surprise, minimum chance for evidence destruction." Mercy studied the tactical maps, amazed at how professional everything looked. "And the police?" "We have 2 honest detectives briefed and ready," Mrs. Kingsford assured her. "They'll accompany each search team." As evening approached, the activity slowly wound down. Mercy found herself in the garden, needing a moment of quiet to process everything. Bram joined her, offering a cup of coffee. "Penny for your thoughts," he said softly. Mercy accepted the coffee gratefully. "Just taking it all in. A week ago I was just a kennel tech, trying to do my best for the animals. Now look at all this." "You were never just anything," Bram replied. "I saw that from the beginning. Your compassion, your determination. Those aren't small things, Mercy." She felt her cheeks warm at his words. "Thank you for everything, for stopping that euthanasia, for believing me, for standing by me through all this." "There was never any other choice," he said simply. "Not once I saw who you really were." Their eyes met, and Mercy felt something shift between them. This wasn't just about the case anymore. They'd found something unexpected in each other. A shared purpose, a deep understanding, and maybe something more. The moment was interrupted by Mrs. Kingsford calling them back inside for final preparations. But as they walked back together, Mercy felt stronger than ever. They had resources, legal authority, and most importantly, they had each other. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, but for the first time, she truly believed justice was within reach. The warmth of Bram's presence beside her, the solid support of Mrs. Kingsford's influence, and the satisfaction of seeing their evidence transformed into action, it all combined to fill her with hope. They were no longer fighting alone in the shadows. Tomorrow, they would bring everything into the light. The morning air was crisp and clear as Mercy pulled into the shelter parking lot at 5:45 in the morning. Her hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, but her resolve was steady. Bram's truck pulled in beside her, and just seeing him there helped calm her nerves. "Ready?" he asked softly as she stepped out. "As I'll ever be," Mercy replied, straightening her jacket. Within minutes, 3 unmarked police cars glided into the lot, followed by Mrs. Kingsford's sleek sedan. The private investigators emerged, their faces serious and professional. Detective Sarah Martinez, who'd been briefed on the case, approached with the search warrant clearly visible in her hand. "Remember," she said quietly, "we do this by the book. No mistakes." They waited in tense silence as the shelter's morning staff began arriving. At exactly 6 o'clock, Vince, Mallory's silver Mercedes, pulled into his reserved spot. He stepped out, straightening his tie, and froze when he saw the assembled group. "Mr. Mallory," Detective Martinez called out, her voice carrying across the parking lot. "We have a warrant to search these premises and seize specific documents." Mercy watched as the color drained from Mallory's face. He recovered quickly, but she caught the flash of panic in his eyes. "This is ridiculous," he blustered, trying to block the entrance. "You have no right." "We have every right, Mrs." Kingsford stepped forward, her presence commanding. Judge Harrison signed the order herself. The detective handed Mallory the warrant. His hands shook as he read it, his face growing darker with each line. "This is harassment," he snapped. "I'll have all your badges for this." "Step aside, Mr. Mallory," Detective Martinez said firmly. "Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." As they entered the building, Mercy felt a surge of satisfaction seeing Mallory forced to watch helplessly. The private investigators moved with practiced efficiency, securing exits and beginning their systematic search. Bram stayed close to Mercy's side as they headed for Mallory's office. "The ledgers will be in his private files," Mercy said confidently. "He keeps everything on paper. He never trusted computers fully." The office was exactly as she remembered it, immaculate and imposing, with its heavy wooden desk and walls lined with certificates. Detective Martinez supervised as they began searching through filing cabinets and drawers. "Here!" Mercy called out after 20 minutes of searching. Behind a false panel in the bottom drawer, she found 3 leather-bound books. Her hands trembled as she opened the first one. Bram leaned over her shoulder, his presence steady and reassuring. "Look at these entries," he murmured. "Dates, locations, amounts. It's all here." The ledgers detailed everything: the stolen animals, the falsified, euthanasia records, the money changing hands. Each entry was meticulously recorded in Mallory's precise handwriting. He was too proud of his system to destroy the evidence, Mercy realized. He needed to keep track of every detail. Detective Martinez carefully bagged the ledgers as evidence. "This is exactly what we needed," she said. "With these records, we can trace the entire operation." Outside the office, they could hear the search continuing throughout the building. Mrs. Kingsford's investigators were photographing documents and collecting digital evidence from computers. Mercy felt lightheaded with relief. After weeks of struggle and fear, they finally had solid proof. She looked up at Bram, seeing her own joy reflected in his eyes. "We did it," she whispered. "You did it," he corrected gently. "You never gave up." Their moment of triumph was interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. Mallory stood there, his face twisted with rage as he watched the investigators carrying out boxes of documents. "You'll regret this," he snarled at Mercy. "All of you. You have no idea what you're dealing with." "I think we do," Mercy replied steadily, drawing strength from Bram's presence beside her. "Every falsified record, every stolen animal, every bribe, it's all documented in your own handwriting." Mallory's face went from red to purple. For a moment, Mercy thought he might actually lunge at her, but Detective Martinez stepped between them. "Mr. Mallory, I suggest you contact your attorney," she said firmly. "You'll be hearing from us very soon." The morning light streamed through the windows as they finished securing the evidence. Staff members watched wide-eyed as box after box was carried out to waiting vehicles. Mercy caught glimpses of shocked faces, some guilty, some relieved, some afraid. Mrs. Kingsford approached them as the last of the evidence was loaded. "Well done, both of you," she said warmly. "The investigators will need some time to process everything. But with these records," she smiled, "let's just say Mr. Mallory's operation is finished." Mercy watched as Detective Martinez spoke quietly with Mallory, who had collapsed into a chair, his arrogance finally shattered. The sight should have filled her with satisfaction, but instead, she felt oddly hollow. "It almost seems too easy," she murmured to Bram. He nodded thoughtfully. "Men like Mallory always keep records. Their ego demands it. They never really believe they'll be caught." They walked together to their vehicles, the morning sun now fully risen. The parking lot was filling with regular shelter staff, all watching the scene with varying degrees of curiosity and concern. "What happens now?" Mercy asked, suddenly uncertain. Now we make sure these animals are properly cared for, Bram replied, and we start fixing what Mallory broke. The ledgers were safely secured in police custody, their contents soon to expose years of corruption and cruelty. Mercy should have felt triumphant, but something in Mallory's final threat nagged at her. He'd seemed too confident, even in defeat. Still, as she watched the police cars pull away with their evidence, she allowed herself to feel a moment of hope. They had proof now, real, tangible proof of everything they'd suspected. Whatever came next, they had won this round. The morning air was warming now, carrying the promise of a new day. Around them, the shelter was coming to life, and for the first time in weeks, Mercy felt like she could breathe freely. They had done what seemed impossible. They had gathered the evidence, exposed the truth, and taken the first step toward justice. The acrid smell hit Mercy first. Her head snapped up, nostrils flaring at the unmistakable scent of smoke. Through the window, she could see dark clouds billowing from the shelter's east wing, where they'd just secured the evidence. "Fire!" The cry went up from somewhere outside. Mercy's heart stopped. "The pups!" she gasped. They'd moved the rescued dogs to the quarantine area, right in the burning section. She burst into motion, Bram right behind her. They sprinted toward the east entrance, but thick smoke already poured from under the doors. Through the windows, orange flames flickered behind a curtain of black smoke. "The side entrance!" Bram shouted, pulling her toward the staff door. They could hear sirens in the distance, but the nearest fire station was 15 minutes away. The handle was hot when Mercy grabbed it. She yanked her sleeve over her hand and pushed through. Smoke immediately assaulted her lungs, making her eyes water. The familiar hallway had transformed into a maze of grey haze and dancing shadows. "The hose!" Bram pointed to the emergency fire station on the wall. While he wrestled with the equipment, Mercy pushed deeper into the smoke. "Here!" she called between coughs. "Help me with these doors!" The quarantine room handles wouldn't budge. They'd been somehow jammed shut. Through the small windows, she could see the frightened pups huddled in their crates. Bram appeared beside her, water spraying from the hose he'd managed to connect. "Stand back!" he ordered, then slammed his shoulder into the door. Once, twice. On the third try, it burst open. The smoke was thicker inside. Mercy dropped to her knees, crawling toward the first crate. Her fingers fumbled with the latch as tears streamed down her face. Above her, Bram fought the advancing flames with the hose, but the fire seemed to be everywhere at once. "Got you," she whispered, pulling out the first crate. The pups inside were terrifyingly still. She pushed the crate toward the door, then turned back for the next one, and the next. Her lungs burned. Each breath felt like swallowing fire, but she couldn't stop, wouldn't stop, until every crate was out. "Mercy!" Bram's voice was hoarse with smoke. "We need to go. 2 more!" she croaked back. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely work. The latches. The heat was becoming unbearable, pressing down like a physical weight. Suddenly, Bram was beside her, helping with the last crates. Together, they dragged them toward the exit, staying low under the worst of the smoke. The hallway seemed endless, but finally, they burst out into the blessed fresh air. Emergency vehicles had arrived. Firefighters rushed past them with professional efficiency, taking over the battle against the flames. Mercy collapsed beside the row of crates, her whole body trembling as she checked each pup. "They're not breathing right," she gasped. Her own voice was barely a whisper. Paramedics swarmed around them. Someone pressed an oxygen mask to her face, but Mercy pushed it away. "Help them first." Through bleary eyes, she watched as the medical team worked on the unconscious pups. Gentle hands lifted each one out, administering oxygen and checking vital signs. Bram knelt beside her, his face black with soot, coughing but steady. The ledgers, she suddenly remembered. The evidence, it was all in there. The realization hit her like a physical blow. All their work, all their proof, going up in flames while they saved the dogs. She looked at Bram in despair. The firefighters were making progress, but the east wing was thoroughly engulfed. Water poured in through broken windows as teams attacked the blaze from multiple angles. The morning sun had disappeared behind clouds of smoke that turned the sky an ominous grey. Mercy watched numbly as the pups slowly began to stir, their small bodies responding to the oxygen and care. They would live, but at what cost? Without the evidence, how could they stop this from happening again? It wasn't an accident, she said softly. Mallory did this. He tried to destroy everything, the proof and the pups. Bram's hand found hers, squeezing gently. He didn't argue. They both knew the truth. This had been Mallory's final move, and it had nearly succeeded. The wail of sirens continued as more emergency vehicles arrived. The air was thick with smoke and the sharp smell of burning plastic. Around them, shelter staff gathered in shocked clusters, watching as firefighters battled to save what remained of the East Wing. Mercy finally accepted the oxygen mask a persistent paramedic kept offering. Each breath was painful, her throat raw from smoke. But her eyes never left the burning building, watching their hopes of justice disappear into the flames. The acrid smell of smoke hung heavy in the air as emergency crews worked to contain the last of the flames. Mercy sat on the curb, the oxygen mask finally helping her breathing steady. Her scrubs were streaked with soot, and her hands still trembled slightly as she watched the firefighters move through the building's skeletal remains. The pups had been transported to Bram's clinic for overnight observation. Though they'd inhaled smoke, their vital signs were stable, a small mercy in the midst of devastation. But the weight of their lost evidence pressed down on Mercy like a physical burden. Bram approached, his white coat now grey with ash, and lowered himself to sit beside her. His normally pristine appearance was disheveled, hair wild from running his hands through it, face marked with smoke stains. But there was something in his expression, a glimmer that seemed out of place given their circumstances. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. Mercy pulled the oxygen mask away to answer. "I keep thinking about those ledgers. Everything we needed was in there, the proof of what they've been doing. Now it's just gone." Her voice cracked on the last word. "About that." Bram reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone. "I've learned a few things in my years of practice. One of them is to always back up important documents." Mercy stared at him, not comprehending at first. Then her eyes widened as he began scrolling through his photo gallery. "You didn't. I did." He held up the phone, showing her a crystal-clear image of Mallory's ledger pages. "Every single page, photographed while you were gathering the crates. I had a feeling Mallory might try something desperate." Mercy's hands shook as she took the phone, swiping through image after image. Transaction records, dates, identification numbers, all preserved in perfect detail. How many? 237 photos. Every piece of paper in that office that looked relevant. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I may be old-fashioned about some things, but I do know how to use a smartphone camera." Tears welled in Mercy's eyes, but these were different from the ones caused by smoke. "Bram, you thought of everything." He shrugged, but she could see the pleased look in his eyes. "Not everything, just the important parts. Besides, after working with you these past few days, I've learned to be prepared for anything." Emergency vehicles began pulling away as the immediate crisis passed. The morning sun was finally breaking through the smoke, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Mercy found herself studying Bram's profile, seeing him in a new light. "Why did you do all this?" she asked softly. "You could have lost everything. Your practice, your reputation." Bram was quiet for a moment, considering. "You know, when I first became a vet, I thought following the rules was the most important thing. But watching you these past few days, you taught me something. Sometimes doing what's right means taking risks." He turned to face her fully. "You never hesitated. Not when they threatened your job. Not when they tried to frame you. Not even when the building was on fire. You just kept fighting for what was right." Mercy felt her cheeks warm, and not from the lingering heat of the fire. "I couldn't let them get away with it. All those animals." "Exactly." Bram's voice grew passionate. "This isn't just about these pups anymore. It's about every animal they've stolen, every family they've hurt, every piece of trust they've broken. The whole system needs to change." Mercy straightened, feeling new strength flow through her tired body. And now we can prove it. We can show everyone what's been happening here. We can do more than that, Bram said, standing and offering her his hand. We can make sure it never happens again. She took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. The oxygen mask dangled, forgotten around her neck as she looked at the photographs again. Mallory won't know what hit him. Neither will the county board once they see these records. Bram's expression was grimly satisfied. Every fake euthanasia order, every falsified intake form, every missing dog, it's all documented right here. Mercy scrolled through more photos, her professional eye catching details she'd missed before. Look at these dates. They match perfectly with the missing champion dogs. And these numbers. She shook her head in disbelief. They've been doing this for years. Which means it stops now. Bram's voice was firm. We have everything we need to end this, Mercy. We just need to decide our next move. She looked at the smoldering building, then back at the evidence literally in her hands. The weight of exhaustion still pulled at her, but something else was rising to take its place. Determination, stronger than ever. We take this straight to the top, she said decisively. The county commissioners, the police, the press, everyone. No more hiding, no more games. We show them exactly what's been happening here. Bram nodded, pride evident in his expression. Together? Together. Mercy squared her shoulders, feeling the last of her doubt fall away. The morning sun caught the screen of the phone, making the damning evidence shine like beacon of truth in her hands. They had fought too hard, come too far, to back down now. The battle wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But standing there with Bram, with irrefutable proof of the corruption they'd uncovered, Mercy knew they would see it through to the end. Not just for the pups they'd saved today, but for every animal that deserved better than to be a pawn in someone's cruel game. The morning sun glinted off the polished hood of Eulalie Kingsford's Mercedes as it pulled into the shelter's parking lot. Media vans were already gathering, their satellite dishes raised like mechanical flowers seeking the light. Mercy stood beside Bram, her tablet ready to live stream, trying to keep her hands from shaking. "Are you sure about this?" Bram asked quietly, his steady presence beside her a comfort she'd grown to rely on. "No going back now," Mercy replied, checking the video feed one last time. "Look, there's Channel 5 setting up." And the Chronicle's reporter just arrived. Eulalie Kingsford emerged from her car like a queen taking the stage, her silver hair catching the light. She wore an expertly tailored forest green coat that probably cost more than Mercy made in 3 months. 2 lawyers flanked her, carrying briefcases full of documentation. "Everything in order?" Kingsford asked crisply, her eyes sharp despite her elegant appearance. Mercy nodded. "The pups are inside with our vet tech. DNA results came back positive. They're definitely from your champion's bloodline." "And the live stream?" "Ready to go. We've got over 500 people already waiting in the feed." Mercy showed her the growing viewer count. Social media had been buzzing since they'd announced the event, with animal rights groups and local news sharing the link. The shelter's front doors burst open. Vince Mallory stormed out, his face mottled red with anger. Deputy Morrow trailed behind him, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "This is completely irregular," Mallory shouted. "You can't just—" "Can't what?" Kingsford cut in, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. "Can't claim my own property? Can't expose theft? Please, do finish that sentence. My lawyers are quite interested in your perspective." Mercy pressed the button to start the live stream. "Good morning, everyone," she said clearly into the tablet's microphone. "I'm Mercy Calder, and we're live at County Animal Services. We're here to document the return of stolen property, specifically 2 purebred puppies who were marked for illegal euthanasia to cover up their theft." Bram stepped forward, holding up his phone to show the documentation. "These are the original kennel intake forms, falsified to hide the pup's true identity. And here," he swiped to another image, "are the microchip scans proving their lineage." The viewer count was climbing rapidly. Comments flooded the chat. Outrage, support, demands for accountability. Mercy felt her confidence growing with each passing second. "Miss Kingsford," she continued, turning the camera. Would you like to explain what was stolen from you? Eulalie stepped into frame, every inch the wronged aristocrat. These puppies are from my champion breeding line, valued at over $50,000 each. They were stolen from my property 3 weeks ago, along with their mother. The theft was reported to the police. She fixed Mallory with an icy stare. Imagine my surprise when I learned they were here, scheduled for destruction to hide evidence of the crime. Mallory's face had gone from red to white. These are baseless accusations. We follow all proper procedures, including these procedures. Mercy held up her tablet, showing the photographed ledgers. The ones where you document which stolen dogs go where, or these intake forms with deliberately incorrect breed descriptions. The deputy shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Mallory, if those records are accurate. They're not, Mallory snapped. This is all a misunderstanding. Then you won't mind if we bring out the puppies, Bram said smoothly, since there's nothing to hide. He nodded to the vet tech, who emerged with 2 squirming golden retriever puppies. Their cream-colored coats gleamed in the morning sun, a far cry from the terrified creatures they'd saved from euthanasia. The chat exploded with heart emojis and demands for justice. Kingsford's expression softened as she saw her dogs. The crescent marking is our kennel's registered trademark, she explained for the live stream. It's tattooed in the ear, a detail conveniently omitted from their intake forms. Mercy zoomed in as Bram gently showed the distinctive blue mark. The viewer count had passed 2,000. This is outrageous, Mallory blustered, but his voice had lost its authority. Deputy, do something. Morrow shook his head slowly. What would you like me to do, sir? Prevent the rightful owner from claiming her property? With all this documentation and these witnesses? The media crews were filming everything. Mercy could see the moment Mallory realized he was trapped, either comply with the law or publicly reveal his corruption. The county board will hear about this, he threatened weakly. Oh, I expect they will, Kingsford replied. Along with the State Attorney General, the AKC, and several other interested parties, my lawyers have quite a lot to discuss with them. The puppies were transferred to Kingsford's personal veterinarian for examination. Mercy kept filming as proper documentation was signed and witnessed. The viewer count had passed 5,000. Thank you all for watching, Mercy said to the camera. This is what accountability looks like. These puppies are safe, but there are more animals out there who need protection, more stories that need to be told. Bram's hand found hers as she ended the live stream. The morning's events had unfolded exactly as planned, but it felt surreal, like watching a movie instead of living it. Well done, Kingsford said quietly. Both of you. This won't end here, you know. There will be investigations, hearings. Good, Mercy replied firmly. It's time everything came to light. They watched as Mallory retreated into the shelter, followed by news crews shouting questions. The morning sun had climbed higher, burning away the last shadows where corruption had hidden for so long. The puppies yipped happily from their travel crates, headed home at last. Mercy felt the weight of the past weeks lifting from her shoulders, replaced by the certainty that they'd done the right thing. The truth was out there now, spreading through thousands of shares and retweets, impossible to ignore or bury. As the live stream continued rolling, something snapped in Mallory's eyes. His composure crumbled completely, replaced by raw desperation. With surprising speed for his stocky frame, he lunged toward a maintenance cart, grabbing a heavy pipe wrench. "You've ruined everything!" he snarled, charging straight at Bram with the wrench raised high. Without hesitation, Mercy stepped directly between them, her phone steady as she continued broadcasting. Her voice rang out clear and strong. Case number 2023-4789, documenting assault by Vincent Mallory, currently under investigation for arson and evidence tampering. The deputy's hand moved to his weapon, then slowly lowered as he assessed the situation. 5,000 people were watching live as Mallory threatened violence on camera. "Mr. Mallory," Deputy Morrow said firmly, "drop the wrench and put your hands behind your back." The wrench clattered to the pavement. Mercy kept filming as the deputy pulled out his handcuffs. The metallic click seemed to echo across the shelter parking lot as Mallory was officially taken into custody, his crimes captured forever in the digital record. "You're under arrest for attempted assault, arson, and tampering with evidence," Morrow recited, securing the cuffs. The fight had drained from Mallory's face, replaced by the hollow look of a man watching his world collapse. The justice system moved with surprising speed once the evidence became public. Within weeks, both Mallory and Harold Blix faced multiple criminal charges. The shelter's cruel quota system, designed to hide their trafficking scheme, crumbled under scrutiny. Eulalie Kingsford, true to her commanding nature, seized the moment for lasting change. She established a dedicated cruelty investigation unit with a generous endowment, ensuring no other animals would suffer the same fate. To everyone's surprise, except perhaps Bram's, she named Mercy as the unit's leader. "You've earned this," Kingsford said, her silver hair catching the sunlight. "You showed more courage than anyone with a fancy title." In the quiet days that followed, Mercy found herself drawn to the smallest of the rescued puppies, the one with the distinctive white ear that had started it all. She filed the adoption papers without hesitation. One evening, as she finished settling the pup into her small apartment, Bram appeared at her door. His steady blue eyes held a warmth she'd come to treasure. "Stay with me," he said simply. "Not at the shelter, with me." Mercy looked at the puppy curled up on her worn couch, then back at Bram. For the first time in her life, she felt completely sure of her worth, of her place in the world. She reached for his hand and smiled. "Yes," she answered, choosing love and courage over the fear that had held her back for so long. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.